What I will do is to do a quick recap of first two webinars. Then we'll have a poll, and then around 40 minutes I will discuss today's topic, art and science of persuasion. How can we get sustainable results in a competitive world? What is the art and science of preparing the proposals which will win the deals for us? So a week before, a couple of weeks back, we started with the webinar on Project Success Foundation, wherein I was discussing about that the effective proposals and contracts are foundation not only for a organization success. And when I say organization success, it is the organization top line, bottom line, as well as the contribution margin, uh, customer satisfaction. All those aspects are very important for the organization. A successful proposal or and contract are the one which allows us to achieve those organizations' goal, as well as a good proposal or a sound proposal and contract foundation should help us in achieving the individual goals. Now, individual goals could be in the career growth path. Individual goal should be also work-life balance. Individual goal should be able to work on the complex and bigger project so as to boost our careers. And if we succeed in proposing and contracting with the help of art and science of persuasion, we will be able to achieve both these types of goals, where the organization succeeds, as well as there is a win-win for the individuals. And that is what we covered and discussed, that the project, the proposal and a contract, how they become a solid foundation for the future success. And if that is important, then in the next webinar, we actually thought about or discussed that what are the typical challenges that the proposal teams face. And therefore, the next webinar that I conducted was 7 deadly sins of proposal development or proposal writing. And we started first and foremost with failing to qualify the deal. That means whether we understand what the customer current organization structure or buying centers organization structure are, who are the critical, who are decision makers, decision influencers, who will be sponsoring our proposal, and so on and so forth, as well as who is the current supplier or vendor, what are the processes, what pains they have, what are organizational directions, particularly in terms of technology and enterprise architecture directions. All those aspects are very important for us to know whether the current RFP is qualifying to be a really a deal that we should go for. Now, several times, the proposals, the RFPs are published simply for getting a SOX compliance, or it could be trying to invoke a price war between the vendors and getting a shrewd benefit out of minimum cost. Or it could be that you have already decided a vendor, but you would like to get the opinion of other competitive vendors so as to know that we are not missing any major points, and all that is very important. Now, unless you qualify your deal with, you will not be able to really know whether you should go for it, and if yes, then how much efforts and what are the various ways through which we can really win that. And that is where the first deadly sin that we discussed was on failing to qualify the deal. The second was not offering a compelling value proposition. Sorry. The second was, just a moment, hold on. The second was not focusing on what the customer cares about. Essentially, when we are not qualified the deal, we may not know the exact pains. Please note, the RFPs themselves do not declare all the pain or challenges customer are currently facing. They do not declare it simply because they do not want to publish it to their competitors as well as their investors. And therefore, there is a lot of information that needs to be collected beyond declared information or declared data or in the RFP. And and then we really know what customers' pains, directions, goals, both business and IT goals are, what are the technology directions, and all other aspects which are relevant for that. If we know that, then we will start focusing on the customer's needs. And even after knowing that, we need to show it that in a proper manner, in a way in which the customer understand our proposition or our story properly. And towards that, there is a third deadly sin that I discussed, which was not structuring the document persuasively. Essentially, the idea is that we should tell our story that becomes easy and clear for the customer to understand. We use the right document structure so that there is a clear logical flow in terms of our saying or our proposition laying out. And for that, I suggested four steps. First, we start with summarizing or detailing our understanding of current requirements. Then we talk about and really quantify the outcomes of our proposition. If we can quantify, it becomes much important. For example, return on investment, ROI, or payback period could be of a very vital important for the decision makers and the senior management of our customer. Now, when you really emphasize on the outcomes, then the customer commitment can go up tremendously. Having done that, then we should recommend a solution after discussing various alternative solutions that are possible and clearly recommending what is the best possible solution for the customer. And then last, we should go for providing the evidence that we have all the abilities and capabilities, not only to design this solution, but deliver it within the given limits of the effort and time budgets, and be able to manage all the risks that comes into picture. And that is the structuring of document persuasively is very important, and telling the story. That was the third scene that I discussed about. Then, a moment. Then the fourth scene that I discussed was about ability to differentiate. Please note that we are not the only vendors who are submitting the proposal. Customers normally shortlist at least 5-6 vendors and send RFPs to them, and therefore we'll have a tough competitors. And then customers are quite puzzled why they should choose us as compared to others, and that can be happening only in case we can really differentiate ourselves with our competitors. Now, so your solution could be one of your chief differentiator, or your way of working could be another. Your project management methodology could be another different thing. Your experience could be another differentiator. However, your differentiators need to map with the value expectation. In one of the case, I have seen the vendor stating that we are 200,000 strong company. Now that does not really make a difference for the customers because it does not map to the value expectation to the customer. Your differentiators, when they map with the value expectation of the customers, it becomes a solid strategy for winning the game. And that is the fourth deadly sin that we discussed about. The fifth one is the compelling value proposition. Your ability to show how your solution elements, whether they are the technical solution, the architecture part of it, reusable frameworks, or methodologies that you have, knowledge transfer methods, or any other solution elements, how do they map to the customer value expectation is a very important way to convey that your solution is really foolproof and be able to deliver what customers demand. And that if we fail to that, the compelling value proposition is not clear to the customers. The sixth and seventh was on more on in terms of making it easy for the customers to read the proposal as well as avoiding the careless spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes. For example, how do you structure the proposal? How do you write the executive summary, which is just 2 page? How do you contain the length of the proposal? Make the essential things in the main proposal and add the details in the annexure. How do you enhance the readability by means of a compliance matrix, which is a good navigation tool as well as giving a completeness of the proposal, as well as usage of right type of a graphics, the right type of a language, essentially not complex and big sentences. All that I discussed in the sixth and the seventh scene, that is generally, or the challenge that is normally faced by the proposal team. So having said all this, before just starting for today's I would like to just get some idea about today's subject in terms of asking you a question. Um, so the question is, yeah, sorry. So the question was, do you find 100% these webinars useful, helpful? Yes, most of you said so. There is another question. I have closed this poll. I have another question coming for you. Do you know business development capability maturity model, which is called as BDCMM? I'm just launching that question. Do you know business development capability maturity model? One moment. Poll is in progress. Do you know business development capability maturity model? Okay, so we are 30 seconds in this. Around 83% people have said that they don't know what is business development capability maturity model. Um, well, okay, we'll cover that today. Now I'm launching one more. Are you familiar with capture planning? Okay, after 30 seconds I get answer. 50% of you are familiar with the concept called as capture planning and 50% are not. Okay, so it's a good interesting part for us to know where we are, and then we will start for today's this topic, art and science of persuasion. We are slightly behind the schedule because of the first technical snag, but I will try to cover it by half an hour or 45 minutes. So BDCMM stands for Business Development Capability Maturity Model. It is based on the famous CMMI, the Capability Maturity Model developed by Carnegie Mellon University, and the business development aspect are laid on that basic background of the capability maturity models. There are 5 types of, I'll first cover 2 aspects: what are the capability categories and what are the maturity levels, and then we'll come back again on this. So maturity levels, most of you must be familiar. They are right from one initial, wherein the processes are ad hoc, or there is a complete absence of process, to the point a reactive approach to manage the second level, where the customer requests are reacted. That means you propose based on the RFP receipt, but you don't have the various defined processes of how to respond to the customer request. It is more reactive. At a third level, you find the customer, the business development processes get completely established. They are defined, and organization is trained on using that. And also the BD process is tailored based on the type of engagement, large, complex versus small, routine of the business type of. And then at the level 4, the fact-based decision making. That means you start collecting metrics, start analyzing your win and loss, start knowing what exactly is not helping us, or what are the areas where the improvements can be done upon by means of more metrics driven data. And then at a fifth level, it is as usual optimizing a continuous improvement based on the suggestions and lessons learned throughout the execution of the process. So these are the 5 levels. They are typically just like in a CMM level. And then there are capability categories. There are 5. First is the customer. So the process areas, which I am going to cover afterwards. Wait for a moment. The process areas are classified into 5 categories. First is the customer related process areas. They focus on increasing the customer value. Then leadership, it is building the vision and improving the business development performance. Then the people, enhancing the competencies both of the individuals and the teams. That those are there are process areas which focus on that. Then there is a process area which focus on process management, improving, I mean, not only defining but improving the visibility and accountability, as well as refining the process continuously. These are business development processes, right from analyzing the RFP, preparing the proposals, reviewing the proposals, estimation, defending the proposals, and various processes and sub-processes connected with the business development are covered in this. And then the last process area category is support, and what is the tools and systems and infrastructure that will help in doing this job better. So these are the 5 categories of process areas. Having seen the maturity level and categories, let's revisit the entire the framework. So we will focus today on the customer, the increasing customer value, and that I will define, we will explore down the line. But to give you a quick insight that at a customer where is the increasing customer value, at level 2 it is response generation. Here it is all your proposal writing comes into picture. At level 3 it is solution collaboration, which I called as a capture planning, or essentially being part of with the partner of a customer while defining the problem, bringing the original estimation, helping the customer to develop an RFP, and capturing all the opportunity insights, typically done for large opportunities wherein you have an already relationship with the customer. This is called as capture planning or solution collaboration process area. And relationship management is nothing but how well we manage our account relationship, and that helps us in building up the value proposition with the customer, sharing the knowledge, investing in the competency development both for us and customer, building up a joint preparation of some solution. Those types of things come in the relationship management. Then going in the leadership process area, at level 2, you have just the sales management. Here, actually the project governance come into picture. Please note that proposal development is nothing but a collaborative work, and therefore governance is a very important aspect that it helps you to do the work in an appropriate fashion. Then at a level 3, we have organizational direction. At this point, the business development teams, sometimes called as win center, sometimes called as pre-sales teams, are established, and they are actually full-fledged, full-time accountable and responsible in managing various business development activities, and that is the organizational direction comes in. And the last, in the fourth, is a leadership integration, is the in the leadership process area category, wherein the business development teams or win center teams are completely aligned with the organization's values, vision, values, directions, and business goals. That means they are actually part of the overall strategic performance of the organization. Then we will see quickly the people dimension. At level 2, it is a individual skill development. The organization identifies talented people and further enhance their capabilities by means of appropriate training. At level 3, it is organizational competency development. At this point, the business development group, the win centers or pre-sales teams are already established, and therefore the entire win center teams competency enhancements comes into focus. Here people start seeing the career opportunities and career plans within this particular specific areas. And at a level 4, the collaborative teaming, that means at the proposal stage, how to involve the sales team, the account team, the solutions development team, the estimation team, the finance, legal, and various critical players, how to collaboratively work with them and get the proposal done within the time limits that is available, is what is coming into picture in the level 4 people dimension. In the process dimension, the first and foremost, it is the project and quality. So control that comes into picture at level 2. Here it is nothing but every proposal is treated as a project with a start, kickoff, and end of it, and all the quality control mechanisms are there, whether they are from a check gates that are required, let's say for go to, not to go, or final review by the senior management, as well as the quality review of the proposal in terms of language, story, authenticity, and so on and so forth. All this starts coming into picture. Then at level 3 in the process area, these established processes are followed consistently across the way, and then also allows us to do a tailoring of the business development proposals, business development process, and key goals are maintaining the consistency that comes into picture. At level 4, just like any other CMM, the quantitative performance management come into picture, wherein the metrics are analyzed, and based on that, various improvement decisions are taken care of. The support process area starts with, at level 2, work environment and tools, simply by Microsoft Word or any other word processing tool, graphics tools, project management tools, appropriate space. All those comes into picture into and also all these tools are established and are available for the business development win center teams. At level 3, knowledge and infrastructure management comes into picture. Your collaboration tools platforms is in place. The knowledge of wins and losses, the knowledge of best practices, the reusable content sharing, all this walks into picture at level 3 of support area. And at level 4, it is a integrated systems. That means not only you have your own environment and infrastructures and tools, but they are integrated with other systems such as proposal, the project management tools, the risk management tools, the MIS tools, the dashboards and all other is called as an integrated environment that comes into picture. So we saw quickly around 15 process areas organized both by means of categories and levels. At level 1 of course is ad hoc. At level 5 it is a continuous improvement and improvement with the help of quantitative as well as other suggestions. But these 15 areas comprise of level 2, 3 and 4 and classified into 5 categories: customer, leadership, people, process and support. So this is generally what the business development capability maturity model is. Today I'm going to focus on the customer process areas, and we will see top down from account management or relationship management, then capture planning or solution collaboration, and then last but most important is the response generation, which is really probably quite interesting you. So I'll go further. Then there are other areas, just like in, if you are familiar with CMM, you know there are something called as process area specific goals and generic goals. Here it is called as sustainability factors. They are divided into institutionalization of a managed process as well as defined processes. And you will find how organizational policy, accountability, providing the right type of a skilled and competent resources, identification of relevant stakeholders, objectively evaluate the adherence to the process, whether the business development processes are really followed or not, and auditing them and seeing that they are adhered to. All those are the goals that come into picture, and you require a process, a set of processes to take care of that. We are not only achieving the process specific goals but the generic goals also, and that is the sustainability factors. It is not that we need to achieve once in a while a brilliant performance in the proposals and contract, but it is a sustained performance with the help of appropriate investments, competence, trainings, support, infrastructure. That is very important, and towards that these sustainability factors play a very important role. What have been observed by, I mean, these are the reviews done, data collected by the BDCMM group in terms of how much the BDCMM process, the framework is helpful. And they normally are measuring into two important metrics. One is called as win rate, which is nothing but number of proposals that you have won were divided by number of projects that you bid and the percentage of it. And then capture ratio, which is the value of projects you have won divided by value of projects bid of it. I mean, so one is in terms of number of proposals, another is in terms of value of proposal. And if you are at a level 1 and 2, your win rate, your capture ratio is around 30 to 35% less than the standard one that comes into picture. Normally at level 3, we have seen around 30 to 35% increase on these factors. Both win rate is around 30 to 35% and capture ratio could as high as 200 to 300%. So there is substantial gain in terms of adopting these best practices, developing your process areas as guided by the framework, and then religiously using them in your day-to-day business development activities has given a substantial benefit to the organization, which can be, let's say, accredited at level 3. At level 4 and 5, it is seen that we sustain and the performance and could be continuously improved upon also. But the sustenance is very important. So that is a quick glimpse in terms of how much this framework is beneficial, and this data has been collected from hundreds of organizations and neatly compiled, and they keep on revising these figures, but this is probably the latest one. And we see some insight that there is a merit in adopting this framework and using it for our business development activity. Now, having covered all the major aspects of the framework, I would like to now start on the customer-focused process areas. And first, we will see the relationship management. And in that, I would like to discuss only on key account management. So here when we say key account, it is 80-20 rule that is very important. Essentially, if there are 10 accounts with which you are dealing with, then it is possible that 20%, 2 to 3 accounts are contributing something around 60 to 70 or 70 to 80% of the metric in which you are interested. Generally, people measure the metrics called as top line or the sales volume that we get from. But I would like to suggest that this 80-20 rule should be applied to the profitability or a contribution margin that we are getting from the customers. Please note that the customer who is giving us high sales or the percentage wise it is highest may not be the highest profitable account, because the customers who are giving us a large business are also demanding in terms of early deliveries or the skills levels or in terms of investment, essentially which is hitting our profitability. So therefore, there has to be a neat measurement method through which you can define your key account manager. But you need to focus on those vital few, that is around 20% of your accounts, which are giving you 80% of your business in your business line. That is very important. Having done that, then you will be able to know your customer, and you should start knowing your customer. More important, what is the policies of that customer, in what market they are working, how is their own finance performance in last 3 to 5 years, what are their buying processes, in terms of the buying center in which we are working, which is the decision making unit, who are the decision makers, decision influencers, solution architects, who are the procurement people, who are the finance and legal people. All of those stakeholders, we should have a relationship with them. How well they know our company, how well we have a relationship established with them, where are the opportunities to get their buying more, how do we improve upon our relationship. All of this can be done if we start building up a knowledge base on our customers, and that is know your customer. Then we need to analyze the opportunities. Essential idea is that there is something account appeal. I mean, we develop a matrix called as opportunity index, which is of 2 dimensions. One is called as account appeal and another is called as our position. Account appeal factors are nothing but how large that customer is. If something like it is G's and IBMs of the world, it could be a very interesting account that we need to really hold on. Correct? So it is the volume, the opportunity space itself, or whether they are the industry leaders, how well they have been performing in it. Are their business directions are in terms of investing in the solution areas that we are trying to do. All those factors are account appeal factor. How much that account is appealing for us. And then our position, how well we are prepared for it. The customer expects some solution direction, and how much our frameworks, products, tools, methodologies are aligned to that. How much competent people we have, whether our methodologies and processes are really geared towards delivering the best of the breed solution to the customer. These are the factors we assess, and based on that, we actually know how good the opportunity is and how well we are positioned for that. As well as we need to do our competition analysis within the given sphere that we are working. Who are the competitors? who are already working or engaged with the customer and do the SWOT analysis, the strength, weakness, opportunity and threat, so as to know exactly how competent we are or what is our edges. Then as I discussed earlier, we need to do the profitability analysis so as to know the 20% of the accounts which are contributing to 80% of our profit, and therefore one may decide to focus on those profitable accounts rather than just high volume sales account. I mean, it's individual organization's policy based on the stage at which we are working. However, profitability analysis is very important. If ultimately, if you are not making profit out of that account, just getting the high volume of sales is not important. That is what it is. Having done all this analysis, that means collecting the knowledge base, analyzing the opportunities, and having done the profitability analysis, you are geared for developing what is called as account planning, and that in that account plan, you decide what are your goals. Now your goals could be enhancing your business by, let's say today it is only 20%, we would like to get 40% of the customers share, or you could be enhancing the customer referenceability, whether the customer is ready to refer to you to other buying centers within the organization or to the other external customers. So those types of objectives or goals that you define, and for that you have to define what could be your strategies, what are the various events that you will conduct, what type of a communication strategies that you will have, what are the ways in which you will have engagement with the customers, whether it is in a proof of concept pilot projects or whether it is developing some solutions together, or whether it is simply sending some white papers and thought papers and various other things that can come into picture, is what you define in the action plan. And this is a brief overview of our account management. Of course, I know this subject is big enough and it takes at least a one-day complete workshop to explain you in depth and detail the various nuances of account management. But this is that level 4 relationship management in the customer focus process area. I'll take a pause of 5 seconds and then start. Then at level 3, this is the solution collaboration process area, typically called as capture planning. The word has come from government tenders. Uh, government tenders. It is nothing but capturing the opportunity details, and that is where the word that has come into picture. You have an account relationship established. Therefore, there are several opportunities in which you engage with the critical people or the key people of the account, and you learn about the upcoming opportunities. And whenever you see there is a mega opportunity or major opportunity that is walking into picture, you actually start invoke this process called as capture planning, in which you start from an unknown position to a favored position. Here, even before the customer is publishing an RFP, you are trying to engage with the customer in a partnership mode and help the customer in doing various aspects. So you start with an unknown position and you do all your research, analysis and validation with the customer. You have your own experience in that particular industry segment. You probably have solved such a problems earlier. You have learned from your own research of the particular domain area, and therefore you can really discuss with the customer about the probable challenges, risk, issues, pains that come into picture. You can also discuss with the customer that what are the types of returns or what are the general industry trends that are there, both the industry trends and business trends and technology trends that are coming up. So you start doing the research with the help of a customer and you produce a document which will cover the opportunity description overall, issues that you have found out and hot buttons with the areas which is where the customer is emphasizing, and maybe it is an early picture, it may be slightly fuzzy also, but it is still important so as to record that this entire document then will down the line will be shared with the entire capture team, and becomes very important to them to know all these aspects, like who are the other competitors that are possibly already working or will be coming into picture. And you may even develop your own bidder comparison chart, how well we are positioned for these particular opportunities. This type of document is then shared with the entire team, which will be comprising of, let's say, solution architects from your organization. Typically, this document will be prepared by the sales or account team, and will be shared and presented to solution architects, project managers, estimators, finance people, legal people, and all those, so as to they become forward aware about what type of opportunity is walking in and how we are currently positioned there. Having done that, then you start developing the very high level solution approach. And one of the things that you do is an integrated solution worksheet, which is the most important part in the capture planning process. It is nothing but noting down the major customers' requirements, pains, issues, and what are our solutions, what are the current benchmarks, and how much we can bring a value to the customer, and if there are any competitive solution already there, then how do we compare with that. All that is called as an integrated solution worksheet. The technical and management part of the solution is described, what particular team will play an important role or could be useful for winning this big opportunity, identifying those people in our organization, as well as if you need to do subcontracting, then you need to know who could be the vendors with whom you can do the partnership. All these are prepared. Another very important aspect is first level insight into the cost and what could be priced to win, whether and what will be your pricing model, whether it will be cost plus or whether it is value based, outcome based, or it will be fixed price, and all that. Those discussions are done in this known position document. Having done that, then we actually start doing the influencer work. You start developing a customer contact plan. You have an action plan for collecting the intelligence, contingency management, as well as solution development plan. The the most important part of capture planning is nothing but is most important part is this action plan. This action plan is developed and systematically implemented. You start progressing from a known position to improve to the fair position. You start communicating with the customer at a right level with the right type of content and with the right frequency. You collect the intelligence of the activities happening by the competitors and other key stakeholders of the customer side. You develop the solution, and you actually have the overall solution view. However, you start building the nitty-gritties of that. And from these various activities, you start walking from unknown position to the fair position. Nowadays, with the help of internet, 40 to 80% of the expected solution information is available to the customer. If we start doing a value add to the customer by means of defining the problem, helping them to estimation, in risk management, in various processes that are expected, in the technologies that needs to be looked into, and bring the solution refinement to the customer before writing the RFP. The customers are favorably tuned towards us. They are working with us as a partner and not one of the vendors, and therefore your success chances of winning large and complex big deals enhances and takes a quantum jump. And for that to happen, you need to have a very sound and solid capture planning process. Now I'll turn to the last topic of this particular webinar, and this is the reactive response generation at a level 2 in the customer focused process area, and this is normally what we do in the proposal development. And this we will elaborate in our workshop completely, but I would like to give you a quick insight of what we will be covering, as well as what typically you should be doing it. So the first and foremost, when you have received the RFP, just reading it many times is not useful. It is the way in which you analyze that RFP is very important. You should have a method and tool to do the analysis of RFP. So what I mean by analysis is whether you are able to identify what is the functional scope, what is the activity scope, what are the business goals, what are the IT goals, what are the customer pains, what are the issues that we should take care of, what major risks are there, and all those types of elements that you need to really uh, get out of the RFP and neatly organize in a RFP analysis document. Uh, you probably have a team which will be divided into few people reading the RFP from a solution point of view, few from estimation, or one or two only on the risk, and they have a typical perspective with which they really read the RFP and analyze it and put those analysis observation in the combined document, and therefore what emerges is a complete 360-degree view of an analyzed RFP, and there is a complete understanding, or all of the proposal team is on the same page in terms of analyzing, in terms of the opportunity nitty-gritties. Having done that, you need to do bid no bid. The bid no bid is nothing but whether to go for it or not, and you may have a method. You may simply take a decision. Sometimes some organization takes a decision that, well, we will go for all the business, but it is at the cost of opportunity cost. If you start following all the proposal RFPs that you have come to you, you may lose because you may not be able to focus on critical few. So therefore you need to have a bid no bid method. You need to decide what are the opportunity factors and risk factors that you will focus on, and you need to have a method to score them and arrive at your decision. Then comes the concept of win-theme development, which I have earlier discussed also. You have your solution elements, and if they are mapped with the customer value expectation, then you know which of the solution elements are going to play very important role in terms of achieving the customer's value driver, value expectation drivers. Out of the various value expectation, there are 3 or 4 which could be very keen or customers would not like to compromise on. Just an example, in a finance solution, customer would never like to compromise on security. And if you have a solid solution which is mapping to the security, you have a much higher winning chances. So you need to decide your win thing, and similarly you need to map your discriminators or differentiators with the value expectations. I discussed that earlier, so as to bring a solid case that why you and why your organization should be favored as compared to other competitors. These two are very elaborately dealt with in our workshop. In fact, all these 4 play a very critical role in the workshop. We start with the analyzing the RFP, give you an instrument to do the bid no bid systematic analysis, teach you how to do the win theme development, teach you how you can identify your differentiators and map to the value expectation, and with all that in hand, you are taught how to present your solution. You are not going to give the actual architecture, but you are going to describe the architecture. And for that to happen, you need to have a method how to describe your solution, how to present alternatives, and finally, most important, how to recommend a solution properly. Now all this will be taking a lot of length of your proposal, and as you know, executives are not very interested in going through hundreds of pages. So therefore your ability to write just two-page summary, which is called as executive summary, which is very important. So we teach you how to develop, use a tool called as cognitive webbing to effectively develop the story of an executive summary, as well as how can you use it for the throughout the persuasive storytelling of the proposal. But executive summary is a very important part. And then last two parts that we cover is called as language of success, which is more focused on what type of language that you should use, or probably more on what you should not use. Large and complex sentences, active wise, not passive wise, then using the acronyms appropriately, trying to avoid the jargons as much as possible, usage of nice graphics, explaining the section at the beginning, properly using the white space, using and providing quick navigation mechanisms. All these come under the language of success, which is most important part that we do. And then like any other aspect, it cannot be coming of a real quality unless there is a perfect review system in place. And therefore, what are the types of reviews that should be done? To begin with, how should you use tools to do the first level of review of the spelling mistakes, grammars, length, readability, and so on and so forth, of using the compliance metrics development, and all various types of tools that you can use. Then how can you use a checklist so that the individual reviewers really do a very diligent work in finding out the problems, and then how collaborative review mechanisms can be brought in so as to bring a 360 degrees view and review of the proposal. Not only the technical solution architecting people should review it, but finance, legal, the sales view, the account view, and all those views are very important for a winning bid. And that is what we really teach you in this entire response generation. This is what is expected in the proposal processes. And with that, I will take a halt, and we'll go for questions now. So thank you very much for patiently listening. I again apologize for the first technical glitch. I think for around 7 minutes we were not audible. There was something going wrong, but I hope I were able to cover almost all of that that I wanted to cover on that. Now we can go for questions. I think like last time you haven't entered the questions, so we'll take another 2 to 3 minutes, allowing you to enter the questions if at all they are there. So two questions I have received and I will start with that. First question is from Pawan Bandari. He is asking, are you going to provide few sample proposals at the end of a training? I can. Um, However, we actually suggest you bring your own proposals and try to do the review within the workshop, and you will find how that can be improved. And I have found in several workshops people getting a lot of insights of their work that they have done earlier where things have gone wrong. So from that perspective, my strong suggestion would be bringing your own proposals where we can think about providing you some sample proposals. I will not recommend that as an ideal proposals, but they are close to the good one, or they are close to the best one, and they have done their winning things. Therefore, I can share some of the proposals with you, but my suggestion will be you bringing your own proposals for review purpose. Then I have another Akash Pandey. Is there any online course or tutorial for cognitive tool used for executive summary uh, composition? Uh, Online tools actually will be available, something like mind mapping and others. However, the point is how to apply it for executive summary you need to learn, because there is no direct tool which is focused only on executive summary or cognitive webbing for the proposal purpose. So from that point of view, you really need to be part of our workshop where you will be able to see how these thinking tools can be applied for not only developing a nice executive summary, but developing a persuasive document structure for the entire proposal. And therefore, just online course may not really help you. Then there is a question from Smriti Pandey regarding the pricing part. Should the same be elaborated in the proposal along with resource cost and rates? What is the best way to present price estimates in the proposals? Now, Smriti and all others, please note, uh, most of the time, and unless you have really a very mm, uh, sound relationship with your customers, you will not share your cost details, because what you price to them is generally in T&M maybe cost plus your expected contribution margin. However, you never share the cost with the customer, with the prospective, for the prospective opportunities. Now, when you are on time and material, you will quote the rates, and there are various ways in which the simplistic could be starting with role based or level based. That means how much you will charge for the project manager of a junior project manager versus senior project manager, how much for the testers and developers and so on and so forth. So role based, level based, that you can give. Or if it is really named time and material, that means they have specific resources in which they are interested, then what will be the rate for each individual could be coming into picture. But actual estimates of your effort, as well as the cost estimates that you come into, they are never shared with the customer. Else otherwise you will lose your negotiation, because you are now uh, completely at a receiver end, by means of educating the customers in all possible details. So you will have to hold that information and play your cards appropriately during the negotiation, and therefore I will strongly recommend not to share the cost estimates, effort estimate, cost estimate and others. You can quote the date on which you are ready to deliver. You can say what is the total charge that you are going to give in a fixed bid price. You can give a rate card in a time and material base. You can give an outcome based pricing, but never your cost estimates. Okay, I hope that, are you that's all the questions are. Mr. Pandey again, thank you. Okay, before we end, I think we have one last poll that is coming to you. Okay. Yeah, 13, 14, we have question. We have one more question. 13 or 14. The last question in the poll is about participation on 13th and 14th May.
Hi friends, Nikhil from Seed. I'm taking care of the sales and operations for this particular workshop. So with the sir's help, we were able to conduct all the three webinars successfully. And you can also refer the recorded link of this webinar. We will be sharing on your registered email IDs. And yes, for this particular workshop, the classroom training which we have planned on 13 and 14, the course outline and also overall session details are available on this particular link, and you can contact us or you can also mail us your inquiries and queries on the email IDs given on this particular landing page. So that's it from my end, and sir can close this particular session formally now.
Okay. So thank you very much. We really sincerely appreciate you investing your time on a Friday afternoon when you are about to really close the week. And I hope with these three webinars we were able to give you some insights about this vast topic of business development. Um, while the proposal writing itself is a reactive and straightforward thing that appears, but it has a lot many insights that we go on covering on it. And as we go for a more large and a complex, the areas of capture planning as well as account management and a whole lot of other aspects of competency development and environment creation and all those walk into picture. So we covered a lot in this. Thanks once again. Your participation is highly appreciated and hope to see you on 13th and 14th May for further in-person discussions and interactive sessions. Thanks again and bye for now.
Also,